Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Rover Product Enhancements, V5.12, Rate Relationships Reimagined and More, presented by Stayntouch Implementation Consultant, Christopher Devlin. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at Stayntouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of Rover V5.12 product release. In this webinar, we will explore significant updates to rate relationships in Rover, many of which were heavily requested in our feature forum. We'll also review changes to the Housekeeping Room Status page, discover new enhancements to the Occupancy and Revenue Summary report, explore how to search by AR invoice number and in Invoice Search, as well as how to retrigger paid checked out invoices to Fiskaltrust, and finally review Austria-specific enhancements to Vienna City Tax calculation. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. We will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Chris, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you everyone for joining today. I will present my screen in just a moment. Are you able to send that over to me, Erin? There we go. Thank you. Perfect. So thanks everyone for joining. We're very excited to take you through some of the latest and greatest enhancements we have in 5.12, as Erin said. A lot of it is to do with rates. We have some country-specific things for Austria to cover, but some good stuff that's been requested by a lot of our customers. So let's dive right in. We're going to start by looking at a new setting we have for our relative rates, our child parent rates, specifically when it comes to calculating the extra adult and child occupancy. So I'm going to navigate into the back end of the system. We're in a training hotel here. And I've actually configured some rates just for this exercise so we can all see how this works and what we're talking about. So these first three rates are the ones that we're going to be playing around with today. You can see I have a webinar parent rate here, and then I have a webinar child rate, which is based on that webinar parent rate. So let's take a look at the webinar parent rate first so we can see how this has been set up. So there is a new box which appears right here, this extra adult child minimum amount threshold. And I have that set to 100% currently. And what that's doing is it's telling the system any relative child rates that are dependent upon this rate. When it comes to calculating the extra adult or child amount, this is the percentage that it should be looking for, not the percentage that might be indicated in the based on amount. So how that looks on the child rate, if I go into the webinar child rate here, we can see that this rate is actually set to be 10% below the webinar parent rate for the single and double occupancy. However, we have that 100% in there for the extra adult and child. So if I scroll down to the actual values here, we can see that the single double is taking that 10% off of the parent rate. But because we indicated 100% for the extra adult and child, that is staying flat to what it was. So that gives us some flexibility. We could maybe do that at 10%. We could keep it at the same percentage relative to the parent rate if that made sense. But for those hotels that are using extra adult and child occupancy amounts, this allows them to keep that static, even though the rates themselves are fluctuating. Speaking of the difference between and the calculation between the parent and the child rate, we've also added a new option, which is the rounding. So when we're copying from a rate, we now have some options for rounding. And you see here I have this on nearest full amount, which means when we scroll down here, it's actually rounding up to the $0 amount, so $4.49, for example. If we were doing the straight percentage calculation, that would probably be a little bit different. And we have this option here for nearest 10 decimals. If I go ahead and select that and click on Save, notice this is updated to the nearest 10 decimals. So it just gives us that flexibility to make those rates a little less derived looking. So you can make it a round number, and then that might look more appealing on the website for customers who are booking. Like I said, it looks a little less derived in that regard. We have some more functionality that we've added with regards to parent and child rates. One of the most important being the linking of a child rate to a new parent rate. So with these three rates that I have set up currently, you can see that the webinar child rate is relative to the webinar parent rate. But I have this other rate, webinar new parent rate, and I would like to link this child rate to the new rate and disassociate it from the original one. Very easy to do. I'm going to click into the derived rate, into rate details, and where we have the based, I'm going to click into here and actually select webinar new parent rate. Go ahead and click save. And in the back end of the system, it's actually just reassociating it with a new parent rate. So you can see now that based on value has updated. Any derived rates that I might have from this child rate would stay exactly the same. It won't affect anything that's linking to the child rate. Similarly, if you have reservations on the books with this rate code, that won't impact them at all. It just really associates where it's pulling in the parent information from, just making a change there. Similarly, if I wanted to actually make this child rate a parent rate or an independent rate that's no longer linked, I can also do that now. We can break that association, and that is also fairly easy to do. We just simply have to go into this based on copy from box, click on select rate, save our way through there, and we have gone ahead and made this a rate that is now independent. It's no longer based on any parent rate, as you can see here. So very useful in terms of managing rates without having to necessarily create new rates, just reassociating. And that was heavily requested in our feature forum, as Aaron mentioned, so we're happy to see that in production. Some other nice features that we have added are, and I have another property open up here so we can see this one. In our housekeeping area, if I navigate to housekeeping and room status, when we have multiple pages of rooms, so this is really for properties that have a higher inventory. If I go to page 2 here, for example, and let's choose a room number to look into. By clicking into the room status back button here, it's going to bring me back to the page that I was working on. So again, a lot of properties that have a lower inventory number, this may not impact them, but for those with higher counts of rooms, like 500 rooms and such, there can be multiple pages here, and this is definitely a time saver, also heavily requested. So happy to see that there too. We have also added a new filter in one of our reports, which is our Occupancy and Revenue Summary report. And that's found in our reports list, and that is the day use filter. So if we scroll down to our Occupancy and Revenue Summary, it's this filter right here, and this is for rates that we have configured as day use rates. And how we see that in the system is under rates, and if we click into a rate, we have this day use toggle. So again, this is really mostly significant for those of our hotels that are predominantly airport hotels with day use business, which is quite high. It allows them to break out the occupancy and revenue statistics from that. With the reports purged, I can show you some examples that I quickly ran earlier on today. Here you see the occupancy and revenue summary with the day use statistics. I don't have much by way of revenue in here, but it shows you that we have it listed out, day use ADR and such. And here you see it with that toggle not selected, so it can be excluded if needed. It's a little bit shorter there. We have also added under our financials and invoice search, the ability to search by AR invoice number. I actually have a number here that I've copied, which we can just paste in there to make it a little bit easier. So it's just a new feature, ability to search by AR invoice number, which is going to be helpful for those of our customers who work in finance. An extra way for us to search in there. And then moving on, we have some country-specific features which have been added to the system, mostly for Austria in this case. The first of which is the Vienna City Tax. I actually have some images that I have saved here because my property is not set to be in Vienna. There's a specific tax type for Vienna, which, depending upon the rate, would either have the tax be included or exclusive. So it's a complicated tax calculation, and we've added this extra button, Vienna tax, in the tax calculation when that's active. If you are a property in Vienna and you don't currently have this activated and would like to, just reach out to Aaron and we can get that switched on for you in the back end. It would need to be done via the admin team, so we can certainly get that set for you. And with that active, what that's doing is allowing for, like I said, more complex calculations. You can see here, let me just move this to the side. You can see here, there's a breakout with gross and net, and it's pulling out a certain value and then giving us the totals there, which is a legal requirement in that particular jurisdiction. So that would satisfy that if you are in that jurisdiction. Also, we have a back office interface, which is also used in Austria called Fiskaltrust. We've added an enhancement whereby if we're using that particular integration, we can retrigger invoices to be sent to Fiskaltrust. And with that active, and again, that would need to be activated through support or through Stayntouch. With that activated, you then have these options where you can select a particular invoice in that invoice screen and then resend that particular invoice to Fiskaltrust so that your data is all up to date. So again, those last two are specific really for Austria. Everything else is available worldwide. That's all we had to go through for 5.12. So with that, I'll send it back over to Aaron just to see if we have any questions that anybody would like to review.
All right, 1 second. All right, so thanks, Chris, for that insightful presentation. I'd now like to turn over the floor for questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So I'll just give everyone a second to submit. All right. The first question is from Kirsten. My understanding was new reporting was to be rolled out on September 14th. When will this be rolled out?
So the new reporting is going to be staggered. There are different reporting projects that are ongoing at the moment. So if it's a particular report that we're looking for, I would recommend talking to your CSM about that to get a specific update. But yeah, there's different projects ongoing right now with the report, so it's hard to answer that directly based on what report it is what we're looking for. But I would actually recommend getting in touch with your CSM for that particular question.
All right. Looks like we don't have any other questions right now. Give everyone a few seconds. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take the floor to offer some final thoughts. Today, we explored significant updates to relationships in Rover. We reviewed changes to the Housekeeping Room Status page, discovered new enhancements to the Occupancy and Revenue Summary Report, explored how to search by AR invoice number in Invoice Search, as well as how to retrigger paid and checked out invoices to Fiskaltrust. And finally, we reviewed Austria-specific enhancements to the Vienna City Tax calculation. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at aaron@stayintouch.com, and that's on the screen. Thanks, and everyone have a great day.